$5 million is a lot of money that West Virginia chose not to use this year, but they're going to use it next year. Which one's better? I've got to ask somebody that's smarter than me.
You are Locked On West Virginia, your daily podcast on the West Virginia Mountaineers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, guys? Welcome back in. My name is Mountaineer Paul. I am your host. This is Locked On West Virginia and a Locked On Oklahoma State crossover with none other than Cody Stovall from Locked On Oklahoma State. What's up, Buttercup?
That's to me. You said you were going to talk to somebody smarter. I don't know when he's going to make an appearance, but I'm glad to be that person's placeholder in the meantime.
Yeah.
Oklahoma State has a lot of interim stuff going on. I'm going to be interim that guy, and I'm okay.
Well, we're just gonna get in character.
I didn't know Chris Level was joining the show, man. That's crazy.
So we were talking off camera, and I was telling you. So Hoppy Kirschwell, who is one of the most respected media members in the state of West Virginia, he's basically like one of the founding members of media in West Virginia. He's been at it for 30, 40 years, at least this generation, and, very well respected. So he put out a few days ago on a podcast he does called Three Guys Before the Game with our play-by-play, Tony Caridi, another guy named Brad Howell, that West Virginia has chosen not to use $5 million this year and use it next year. And I'm curious because we obviously have one of the worst offensive lines in the sport, and that includes Oklahoma State. So I'm just curious, should I be mad that we didn't use this money? Because we were probably never going to be conference champions even with the $5 million. But I think we'd be a lot better than 2-4. And is there nothing to say for momentum? I mean, we may not be world beaters, but we might be 5-1, 4-2. Maybe we'd still be in contention. You can buy an entire offensive line and a quarterback with that at $700-800K a piece. Like, I know the market because I know several guys that came into West Virginia. I've spoken to several people. You can get starting caliber offensive linemen from the P4 level, starting at about $800K ish, 5, 6, 7, $800K, just depends on where you look. And then anything above that, you're getting really good players like what Utah has, like $1 million plus. So, I mean, it would have been expensive for sure, but the experiment hasn't worked out for West Virginia. I'm just curious what your thoughts are and how do you think that ties into Oklahoma State at all? Because, I mean, do you think they held back any money?
Well, as it pertains to Oklahoma State, right, I think this is kind of a twofold answer. Number one would be, if they knew that they weren't really going to be in contention this year, and perhaps they had some other financial obligations that were more important to begin this season, then it does kind of make sense that they would like to save some of that for year two, if they knew that year one was always going to be more difficult, right, to get the most out of the team. However, like I said with Oklahoma State, we spent apparently like 5.4-ish million on the entire roster last season. And that has put us in the position we are now, to where even though we did spend considerably more this year, we were so far behind the 8 ball with what was already on the roster that we're clearly not in a position to play catch up. So if you have a concerted plan to utilize that $5 million in year two, okay, I get it. But I do think that it is a mistake still yet, because you could have your roster so depleted by that point that when you do get all the dollar bills, you're trying to backfill from the talent that you should have had to begin with. And I think that's one of the biggest difficulties in this proposition. Like if Oklahoma State, okay, the year we spent $5.4 million on Ollie Gordon, Nick Martin, all of those dudes. If we had an extra $5 million and say we spent it on the O-line, D-line, whatever we were able to do this season would have been much, much better, because we already would have had more foundational building blocks of worthy players on the roster. But instead, we had to fill the roster with nothing but transfers, so we didn't have enough of those building block guys. If we had more money spent in year two, we probably wouldn't be so devoid of talent at this moment right now. So, yeah, I think it is a mistake in the long run. Even if you're projecting year two to be the primary year anyways, you have to have enough talent already there That way that you're adding talent with the transfer portal instead of relying 100% on the portal like Oklahoma State currently is in the position of doing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting because West Virginia is going to be in a chance next year in a situation where I think there's 30 or 40 seniors on this team. So what happens now, right? You can't re-sign those guys, or would you probably want to in a lot of cases now that it's played out this way. I'm worried about it. Now, look, I realize that there's a lot of I don't know about this new era because, like, with West Virginia, our NIL is in house now, and I'm not sure what quantifies as the cap and what is considered to be outside NIL. Since you're bringing outside NIL in house and you're also using the cap, can you just ship this $5 million over to the outside NIL and say, hey, we're still going to spend up to the cap? Because then if you can do that, okay, I was wrong the whole time. Like, okay, fine. If you're going to spend $5 outside the cap, we're good. I'm happy with that. What do you say to that?
Well, I mean, there obviously is a little bit of a differentiation between the rev share portion and the old school NIL side of things. So I do think that it's a very fair question to ask. And you're right. If you could kind of maneuver some of that to the other side of the equation, then it may make more sense. But I don't think you can do that. I do think that there has to be like earmarks or allocations set for whichever side the money's coming from. That would, in my opinion, complicate that scenario.
It's just, yeah, I know what you're saying. It's just we're told that West Virginia has chosen to move the outside NIL in-house. So I'm just so curious how that works.
But there's always going to be an external factor, right? For an example, if you have a few players that have a Gatorade deal or a dealership deal down the road, that is different than the rev share portion, right? So those monetary valuations are always going to be completely separate for the most part. You can't have all of it in-house. It's impossible because then the players cannot get those specific brand deals catered just to them, right? So there's always going to be a differentiation of the two. And again, I'm not positive, right? I'm not an expert in this area either, but I don't think you can maneuver the money to multiple sections.
Interesting. It's a frustration for me because I think West Virginia could have been better this year, and I just
Well, not only that, like again, you would have been more prepared for next season, whether it be retention of the talent that you do have or giving a better sales pitch to incoming talent. I do think that Oklahoma State is a cautionary tale that if you go 3 years or 2.5 years without spending legitimate money, you're going to be so far behind that the transfer portal players that you do get, you kind of have to allow them to get away with some things that you traditionally wouldn't have simply because you've got to backfill that talent on the roster. And, it's a very important piece, in my opinion, whenever you're thinking about the two entities, whether it be rev share or NIL. But you can look to teams like Oklahoma State and Florida State and for a long time, Texas A&M, that if you don't have at least enough talent on board at the moment, that the portal class isn't really going to matter because the portal is supposed to be about plug and play, right? If I need a linebacker and a DN and maybe a running back, then I go to the portal. But if I have to build my entire team year after year on the portal, I think there is evidentiary proof that is not going to be advantageous for your future. And now Oklahoma State is now in this position where we just had to build an entire team out of the portal. Now we fired the coach. Now we got to have a new coach. Now we got to rebuild once again, primarily all through the portal. And if we would have had enough money in retention, maybe we wouldn't have the holes to fill that we do at the moment. I actually think that that's a real thing. I'd heard rumors of it happening like after the Oregon game. So maybe do some digging. That might actually be a legitimate thing. Not that it matters anymore.
And for those of you listening, one of the comments says, Lifted Diesel, I'm going to start a GoFundMe account so Oklahoma State can get a new coach. So that's his response.
I like it.
One more question before the break here. So, yeah, I'm with you on a lot of that. I think I wonder, okay, obviously with the cap and everything, we're not exactly sure where all the money's coming from. Like I think a lot of it's university front load money, this and that. But if 5 million of that was perhaps from donors, then it can be, right? Or no?
It depends on how it's allocated.
Yeah.
Like, again, I'm not an expert on this. There's the
Right,
legalities
right, right. We're
involved that
just
I'm
shooting the
not aware
crap, you
of.
know what I mean? Like, we're
But, like,
definitely out of our
for
league here.
instance, when Boone passed away and there was a considerable amount given to Oklahoma State, a lot of people assumed that that was gonna go to the rev share or NIL or Oklahoma State facilities, recruiting, things of that nature, and definitely a little portion of it did, but there was a lot of it that was earmarked for other things that had nothing to do with athletics. So the portion that did go to Oklahoma State athletics, I don't know how it would have contractually been put together on the rev share
Yeah.
side, the personal NIL side. I'm not 100%.
Last before we go to break here, it's Coop says Oklahoma State should hire Neil Brown.
If we were okay with being the doormat of the Big 12 for the foreseeable future, maybe, and I don't disparage Neil Brown per se, but Oklahoma State is not in a position where we could take a massive gamble, in my opinion. And
Yeah.
Neil Brown would be probably too risky. GJ
Right.
Kinney would be considered by some risky. Zach Robinson would be the same thing. John Summerall. There's really nobody you could get out there other than a Nick Saban, Urban Meyer type that is going to remove any crap talking about the next coach.
Well, speaking of the next coach, we're going to talk about Oklahoma State and some search questions that we have and how that pertains to West Virginia. We'll explain next. Basically, what we're saying is John Gruden is going to be the next coach at Oklahoma State. We'll be right back. And this episode of Locked On West Virginia and Locked On Oklahoma State crossover going to be brought to you by our good friends at Mazda. And look, we love talking about Mazda. It's no secret around here. And why is that? Well, Mazda delivers confidence with every ride with more IHS top safety picks awards than anybody else as of August 2025. With all-wheel drive standard in every crossover SUV, you can drive with confidence through almost any season. And like our players, we sweat every detail because when you make every move count, impossible becomes irrelevant. You can do it all today with Mazda and move and be moved. And of course, where would we be without our good friends at Monarch Money? Look, Monarch Money is a pretty simple app to use, and most people can't even name all their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether that's 401k, properties, investments. Well, when you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table after all, and that's why Monarch Money is here for you. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or phone. Monarch is built for people with easy and busy lives. If you put off organizing your finances, Monarch is there for you, and it does the heavy lifting for you. You can link all your accounts in minutes, see clear data visuals, get smart categorization of spending, and finally feel in control of your money without ever touching a spreadsheet. Pretty cool stuff. Don't let financial opportunities slip through the cracks today with use Locked On College at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with the code Locked On College. In segment 2, I crack a do and pose a question to Cody Stovall. Well, actually, you're going to take over, Cody. You had some questions about everything.
Well, I mean, Oklahoma State, clearly seems to have an emphasis on this recruiting search, somewhat predicated by age. You mentioned John Gruden, which we evidently did take a swing after. We made him tell us no.
It's tough.
Gus Malzahn was, for whatever reason, in serious consideration.
Gary Patterson, maybe?
Well, no, we can't afford him because he's with Locked On now, right? Let's be realistic. Yeah. But some of the names that are continuously popular are younger in the age variety, whether it be a GJ Kinney or a Ben Arbuckle down at OU, a John Summerall at Tulane. Whenever you take away the Gus Malzahns and the John Grudens, even Zach Robinson would be classified in this younger category. I think a decent portion of it is just not only longevity at a university, because of course we would like for somebody to stick around like for 20 years, right? Like Mike Gundy. But at the same point in time, in this new NIL age, I think that the age of the coach is something that is being factored in. And I bring that up simply because there are some old school coaches that seemingly are having a little bit of an adjustment phase that is more difficult than they anticipated, like Mike Gundy, like Dabo Swinney, like Jimbo Fisher. This is why Nick Saban got out of the coaching game.
Right.
And I think, Lance Leipold, whenever he went to KU, went on like gangbusters, and they came out of nowhere, and they were the hot topic of the college football conversation. Since then, they have not been bad by any stretch, but they haven't exactly reached that next tier.
Not since Colton Nicky left.
100%, right? And they're spending more money. They've clearly shown that they have more money to spend, but you're not seeing that big uptick that you have seen in some other places. So with that in mind, West Virginia brings in the legendary dude himself, Richrod.
Right.
And he's been much more adaptive, in my opinion, at least externally from what we can see in the NIL and the marketability era. But at the same point in time, this whole industry is about relationships, and it's also about connectivity. I think one of the reasons that the John Summeralls and the GJ Kinneys of the world are very successful is because the relatability to the recruits. Let's face it, man. The old school way of coaching, it may be respected, it may be welcomed by people like us, but 16, 17, 18, 19-year-olds, they're not as receptive to the way things used to be. So if you're an old school coach that is used to things going a certain way, I mean, there's not a lot of old school dudes that are having a ton of success right now. The Dan Lannings of the world are clearly grabbing the world by storm. And most of the Chris Kleiman, he's an old school dude. He's all of a sudden driving a massive struggle bus as well.
Right.
Do you think that Ren Baker was able to factor this into the coaching decision? And even though Richrod is much more embracing of a lot of the newer things, do you think that there could be a connectivity piece that could potentially become an issue? Because I think it's an issue in our coaching search right now.
It could. One of the big factors behind Richrod's hire was all the donors are behind him, right? So the financial piece of that was kind of included. But on the other parts of that, sure, I think there is a bit of a disconnect at times. Richrod was made fun of a little bit for his TikTok stance and different things like that are considered to be old guard. In the grand scheme of things, is his TikTok stance going to matter? I don't know. But, I do think he's openly stated, and even just as we head into the bye week here, stated, look, we're gonna evaluate this thing. We're gonna see if people are playing as hard as they can to win. And if they can't, we know how to fix that. If they are and we still can't, well, I know how to fix that. And I can read between the lines on both of those, right? Both of those cases end up with you either leaving or it's my way or the highway kind of attitude. And I think the big question is going to be is the thing that Pat McAfee bought into, the culture that Pat White and Steve Slayton and Owen Schmidt and all these legends, Tavon Austin to an extent after he got there, but it was still somewhat that culture bought into. Is it buildable in today's day and age with this my way or the highway kind of thing? Because that's what Mike Gundy had too, right?
Correct.
And it didn't work. It crashed, for lack of a better way. Richrod does it a little different.
Kyle Whittingham's in the same department. I know Utah fans will tell you that they're going to run the Big 12 and be in the Big 10 in the next 24 hours. But I think it's fair with all of the hype around Utah, even from Utah fans, they're not exactly overwhelmed with how the performance has been thus far in the Big 12. I don't know how many sports they brought to the fold, but I'm pretty positive Utah has not won a conference title in the Big 12 in any sport whatsoever yet. And I think that even with Kyle Whittingham, they have a lot of returning talent. Devin Dampier is athletically an absolute freak and a phenom, but in some of the minor big-time opportunities they've had this season, capitalization has been an issue. And he's already tried to get ahead of it by naming a head coach in waiting. But, we'll see if that old school mentality is continuously applicable. My only point is I don't know of any, maybe
it's nuanced.
It's
nuanced to an extent.
Yeah, I mean, there's not very many old school coaches that grew up in the two-a-day era.
No, I mean, even Kirk Ferentz is struggling right now. Mac Brown just got out of coaching. Like, they're definitely examples. For every one of those, you have we don't know about Willie Fritz yet, but we think he's going to be pretty good. You know, like obviously, Sharon, you know, because for every Willie Fritz, you've got a Marcus Freeman, or
Yeah.
you've got a Sharon Moore, right? You've got
Yeah.
all these younger guys. It definitely makes a lot of sense, and I'm going to be curiously watching Kirk Cignetti in Indiana to see if he continues to be successful at his
Right.
age. Although, he hasn't been in the public eye as long as some of these other guys.
For sure.
Brian Kelly really hasn't gotten it rolling like we thought he would.
Thank
So
you.
yeah, there are examples.
But
It's a
that's what I'm saying.
scary
There's
time
way
to
more
live in.
examples of the negative than there are the positive.
Yeah, there is. Yeah, there is for sure. But what does age have to do with it? I guess as far, I mean, yeah, okay, okay. Let's take Pete Carroll for example. Do you think he would struggle because he's like one of these kind of guys that's like super upbeat, super positive,
Yeah.
not very much of a clashing type personality like the guys we're talking about that are kind of stoic. I mean, is that the ingredient? Is it like these stoic hard asses? Is it like these kind of guys that are struggling, or and that's why Saban left? Or what are the qualities of the people that are succeeding in this climate?
Well, ask that last part again.
What are the qualities of the coaches that are succeeding outside of your agents? Do you think? Like, I mean, what does Dan Lanning have? He's energetic, right? He's obviously young. He's appealing to younger players, obviously.
I mean, Dan Lanning's a little bit different. He might be relatable because he's down with the Bobby Brown business. No, legitimately speaking, man, I do think that there is a layer of not only connectivity that is involved with it, but just understanding. You mentioned the nuances. The recruiting is different. The handling of agents.
That's the part, yeah.
It's all different. So, I mean, I've heard that coaches have to do far more now than they've ever had to do before. So they're having to recruit more in more locations at more hours. They're having to talk to more donors, more parents, more agents, more lawyers than they've ever had to deal with before. So I think you could make the argument that there's a lot more on coaches' plates nowadays than there ever was previously. So no matter how good you are as a coach, no matter how much of an acumen you have for the developmental aspects on the field, if there's going to be a disconnect, there's always going to be a contingent of players that say, hey, coaches don't get it. Like, coach is cool, coach is a hard ass, coach is smart, coach is a genius, but he don't get it. And you mentioned Brian Kelly. Brian Kelly is probably the most cringy coach in the United States of America.
I agree.
He tries to do the TikTok dances.
Oh God, don't remind me.
He tries to do the lingo thing, and Dabo Sweeney, I think, does some of it. Mike Gundy did some of it, and you have to respect and appreciate the connectivity they're going for. But when you talk to the younger cats, most of them, like, they might appreciate it and respect it, but it's not like it's inspiring to them anymore. It's just a different era, and coaches have to wear so
Dave
many
Doran,
hats.
right? Dave Doran at NC State's another guy that has fallen off a little bit. I mean, the NC State teams from a couple of years ago were really good. They've fallen off a little bit.
Right.
It's definitely interesting. Dana Holgerson was starting to lose it at the end of his tenure, and he's although Dana's still kind of young in his 50s. I don't know. I think age is a part of it, but if you're asking me if Richrod is 62, I'll say no, he's not. He's one of the most energetic. Everybody in our program will say that. Like, it's definitely not that he's unwilling to do it or doesn't have the energy to.
Yeah.
And the experiment's still out on Richrod. Like, there are examples of guys his age doing it. So it's not like it's a one hard line that he can't. But I do think he's adapting. He's learning. And here's the thing. Tony Caridi said it best. Rich Rodriguez loses and takes losing worse than any coach I've ever been around. This is our play-by-play guy. He takes it worse than any coach that he's ever seen. It literally harms him for days. And he'll do what's necessary to make it work, right? So even though it might be a rough stretch, maybe even the first 2 years, I do think because of the backing financially that he has, we'll find out exactly to what level. We know, we've all heard by now that West Virginia plans to be in the top funding tier. What's that look like? I asked, I don't know if you saw these shows that I did, but I had BYU TV's Dave McCann on, who's a huge presence in the BYU community, probably one of their biggest names And I just flat asked him, I said, man, because he travels with the team and stuff. I said, what's it look like? Because, like, I know BYU's in that tier. So and there's a lot of this, like, unspoken church money. So, like, nobody will talk about it. But I was trying to get it out of them. Like, what does it look like? We're trying to be in top funding tier. I'm asking people who see it, what is it, and just not sure. Like, what's it look like? We know Texas Tech's not at 50 million, but they're probably pretty 25, 30 million. Like, so is that the goal? Do you have to be at least close to that? Because obviously you're going to have to go at least 10 mil outside the cap to get there.
Yeah.
And that's tough.
I'm with you. And I'll add one more thing before we get to an add into segment 3 is just the visibility aspect. And that's something that I run into on a pretty regular basis is like the coaches may say something and it may be a leveraging point in recruiting without fully recognizing that some of these recruits have access to information, whether it be from social media or other players that were on the similar visits. So there's some things that were been utilized over the years in recruiting that you can't exactly get away with anymore. And then they have to accept the fact that some of these kids are coming in with a brand already in social media.
That's
so
true.
Some of these people are coming in with contracts already to kind of do the podcasting thing or to do the blogging thing. And they have to cut out some time to allow them to do that. And some of that is just so foreign to coaches that they don't get it, right? They may say it's cool, but that them saying it's cool and then making it applicable, even in 7-on-7, right? A lot of old school coaches hate it because it does screw up like the spatial awareness for the wide receivers and the DBs, because you don't have to deal with linemen. You don't have to deal with the same layering of the football. But a younger coach can find a way to make 7-on-7 applicable for their development to get ready for college. But it's old school coaches seemingly have a hard time with the visibility that the kids have, the access to information, and how to make other things outside of football season practical for them to utilize.
I agree. 100%. Couldn't say it any better. We're going to find out on all this, a lot of this stuff. I think it's still early in the cycle of all this, so the data hasn't matured yet. But we're going to know in the next 2 to 3 years, like, what kind of coach wins in this era, right? Like, what are the great things that you need to be? Up next on the Locked On West Virginia and Locked On Oklahoma State crossover, let's give some midterm grades out really quick. Let's just talk about what these two teams have done so far, and can we find anything good? Anything. This episode of Locked On West Virginia and Locked On Oklahoma State is going to be brought to you by Prize Picks. With Prize Picks, it's pretty simple. Every day we make decisions, but on Prize Picks, being right can actually get you paid. Don't miss the excitement of this football season with Prize Picks, where it's good to be right. Playing Prize Picks is such a fun, simple way to add excitement to football. You just pick more or less on player projections, like Josh Allen's passing yards or Saquon Barkley's rushing for a touchdown. And during the game, right? I really like how quick it is because you can make your lineup in under a minute. You can even copy somebody else's if you want to. You want a new injury reboot feature? Well, that's cool. We got that. If your player leaves early and doesn't return, it won't count against you. It's pretty sweet. Download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's the code LOCKEDONCollege for $50 in lineups after your first $5 lineup with Prize Picks. Dang, it's good to be right. In segment 3, come along with me as I sit here with Cody. I rhymed. A lot of compliments on the shirt, brother. I love it too. We don't have to go into details, but definitely love the shirt, man. Awesome. I'll probably would like to
get America.
Absolutely. Big fans of that shirt. So, all right. Let's talk about these teams here. We'll go 2 or 3 minutes over and talk about midterm grades. Give me a midterm grade for the Oklahoma State Cowboys. You can do it across the board, coaching, whatever you want to do. Just go.
F+ plus.
Oh God. Yeah. I mean, is there anything positive you can pull out of it at all? Any specific player that's like, man, he's been great.
Yeah, I definitely think that whenever you look at the firings of both Mike Gundy and Todd Grantham, the defensive coordinator,
Those are positives. Yeah.
well, instantaneously against Baylor, we went from putting up 0 points, 3 points, 7 points to 27
You did
points.
improve.
Right. So there was a massive offensive improvement. Is it still good? Absolutely not. It's about as good as a three-legged hog, but it was beneficial to see that. And then likewise against Arizona, sure, the back end of the defense got absolutely cooked, but some of the younger guys that haven't got a lot of opportunities to play this season, primarily possibly because of NIL, right? Some of the dudes only making 5, 6, 7, 8 grand a month that are the cowboy culture glue dudes. They haven't really been playing a bunch, but you're now seeing a ton of them get more playing time. And I do think you see a better effort. We only gave up 45 yards rushing to Arizona. We gave up 205 to Tulsa, 220 to Baylor, and we probably gave up something crazy against UT Martin as well. So 45 yards rushing against a competent rushing attack with not only Ishmael Mahdi, but they also have Noah Fafita. We prevented him from getting absolutely crazy in the scrambling department as well.
Oh, did you?
We had 7 tackles for loss, 7 tackles for loss. We had 10 pass breakups. We were in the backfield, hurrying the quarterback. That was encouraging. So seeing some guys like Armstrong Nodum and Landon Fields, yeah, the back end got cooked, but he finally got his opportunity to play. And what does he do? He takes a pick 6 to the house. That is encouraging. Seeing guys that have earned it, that bleed orange, that are willing to run through walls and break their face open just because they do love Oklahoma State. Those are the guys that are playing. And I think that is encouraging. And because of that, you did see offensive improvements against Baylor. You saw defensive improvements against Arizona. If, God forbid, we figure those out and we actually put them together, we could have a win throughout the rest of the season still yet on the way. That's positive.
That is positive. I'll give you mine in a second, but just to answer your UT Martin question, John Gentry torched you guys, 16 carries, 71 yards. Not really torched you guys, but Jace Bauer had 40 yards, and you had a couple other here and there. But yeah, they had like 150 yards of rushing against you guys. So it wasn't.
Yeah, that should not happen.
But yeah, not against UT Martin.
No, because they turned around and lost to UTEP like 41-10 or something like. And then the week after that, they got beat by somebody comparable. Maybe it was even like a UTSA, and it was another crazy score, like 52-10. So the teams that played after Oklahoma State curb stomped UTM. We did not do that.
What's crazy about West Virginia right now is we're still top 10 in the country in sacks, and we haven't had a sack in 3 games. You add Jamori Robinson to the mix, which we were all really excited about. Defensive Player of the Year last year in the American Conference. I mean, it's not like – that's a very good conference. Like, you would think the best defensive player from that conference would be good on almost any team. Well, I'm not saying he's bad. I'm saying that he hasn't made any production yet. And we were expecting him to add to what at the time was the 3rd most sacks in the country.
Tracking.
I think it hurt our pass rush for whatever reason. Some guys that were in a flow were pushed back right behind this guy you're paying probably $1 million to. I don't know the number, but I'm sure it's a lot. But anyway, grades real quick. I think you have to give quarterback an F. There are some upside with Scotty Fox and Khalil Wilkins. I think that they both have a lot of upside, but nothing up until now. I think the coaching has, it's been extreme. You really can't grade it. You have to grade it on the curve, but I'll give it a C because I just think with everything that's out of their control, with Nico Marchiol is gone, Jalen Henderson gone, Max Brown was out. You're down to your 4th, 5th, and sometimes emergency quarterback. Last week we had 2 quarterbacks, and that was it. If one went out, you were down to emergency. You're out of your top rusher for the year. You're out your 2nd string rusher for the year. You're out your 3rd string rusher for,
right.
Like Jaheim White got hurt 1st or 2nd game, whichever one it was. Knighton, who transferred from SMU, never played a game. Ty Edwards, who was the hero against Pitt, got a hit pointer. Now he can't play anymore. So, I'm not going to judge Richrod too harshly. I think that Zach Alley on the defensive side has been very good at times, and it's been rough at times. I think we just don't have enough we went through on offense. We went 3 and out, 6 straight possessions against Kansas and held them to their lowest totals.
Right.
I think our defense just ran into a wall. I still believe in Zach Alley. I still believe he's worth what he is. It's just we don't have the horses like you are right now. You could have Nick Saban implement him right now, and you wouldn't see benefits till next year, right? So that's where we're at. We just don't have the horses, Cody.
Dude,
It's
we
more
have
of a Jimmy's and
horses.
Joe's.
We just have a lot of horses that are about to be put out to pasture.
I think you have a culture problem too, is what we were talking about at one point in time, right? Like there's a culture issue in your locker room.
Yep.
And that's just, you're going to have some rot when that happens. And a lot of times it plays itself out on the field on Saturdays.
Yeah, it's visible.
Because it's all about, I got to get my tape, right?
Yep.
To use a wrestling term, whenever somebody goes into business for themselves, like let's say it's me against you and we're supposed to make each other look great, but I'm trying to get all my stuff in, all my moves in, and I'm not really worried about you. I'm not selling for you, right? And so it's similar on football. It's like, well, yeah, I could definitely run this guy off and get my buddy open, or I can try to do this thing off the line. It looks really great that I can put on my cut up or whatever, So we ran over, but find Cody Stovall, Locked On Oklahoma State. He's at O State all day on X. All day O State, or is it O State all day?
All day O State.
All day O State.
And it's O State all day on like Facebook and Instagram.
Gotcha. I'm at Paul Mountaineer, so you can find me there. Big thank you guys to all the support here recently. It's been a whirlwind. Been really, really great to see during this bye week. We needed it. But make sure you guys, if you follow me, make sure you go follow Cody. He deserves every bit of that. I mean that with all my heart. He's a great guy, as you can see by his shirt. So we thank you guys so much. Before we get out of here, we do have to acknowledge, of course, and always our good buddies we talked about Gary Patterson earlier, Cody. Fire TV College Football Kickoff. It's a long name, but it's a good one. It's another big moment for Locked On, as you guys know, college football fans. Locked On and Fire TV present College Football Kickoff, your ultimate college football weekly preview with Drake Toll of Locked On Big 12, who leads the conversation alongside two-time AP Coach of the Year and future Oklahoma State Cowboy coach Gary Patterson, alongside future offensive coordinator Jesse Holley, and Locked On's local experts. A college football preview only Locked On can do. Catch College Football Kickoff every Thursday throughout the season, only on Fire TV. Thank you guys so much for joining in. You guys showed up in force today for just a random Wednesday at 5 o'clock Eastern, closing in on 200-300 people in here. That's not bad. Thank you guys, and we will see you on the next one. For Cody, for me, this episode's over. Cue them country roads and whatever you guys say. What do you say? Pistols
I
up?
say God
Pistol
bless.
Firing or pistols up?
God bless. Go Pokes.
Go Pokes. Go Pokes, and
you
cue
could
them
say
country
pistols
roads.
firing if you wanted to. That's
Pistols
okay.
firing.
There we go.
Wookiee noises.